You want me to do what? Nyla Harmon's voice quivered just loud enough to startle the couple seated beside them on the rooftop lounge. Kaylan Reeve didn't flinch. He leaned back, his ice-blue eyes steady, fingers laced together on the table like he was negotiating a software acquisition, not asking his best friend of 12 years to carry his child. I want a baby, he repeated, but not a relationship, not marriage, just co-parenting. With someone I trust. Nyla blinked, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or knock over her hibiscus tea and run. You want me to have your baby? Yes. Simple. Flat. Unapologetic. He had no idea what he'd just asked of her. Or maybe he did, and that was worse. Have you ever sat across from someone you loved and realized they didn't see you? Have you ever smiled through the sting of hearing them say, "You're safe, you're easy, you don't come with drama," while knowing what you truly wanted was to be the one they chose, not just the one they trusted? Because Nyla had loved Kaylan Reeve quietly for 12 years. She tucked her feelings into invisible corners of her life, like folded love notes never sent. She had consoled him after his mother's funeral, proofread his first pitch deck at 2 a.m., celebrated when Forbes named him one of tech's brightest stars. And now he was asking for a child, not her heart, not her hand. Her womb. That was all. Kaylan's words weren't cruel. They were calculated. He wasn't trying to use her. He was trying not to feel. You know me, he said calmly. You're the only person I'd trust with something this personal, and I know you don't want messy either. No pressure, no drama, no expectations, no expectations. That phrase carved through Nyla's chest like an icy wind. He thought he was offering her safety. He didn't realize he was reminding her she was safe because he didn't love her. She smiled to hide the hurt. I'll call you. She stood before her trembling knees gave her away, walked to the elevator with her spine straight and her heart splitting wide open. Kaylan didn't follow. He never did. 3 days later, Nyla said yes. Not because she lacked options, not because she didn't know better, but because she couldn't keep waiting for Kaylan to see her. If carrying his child was the only way she'd ever feel him hold her, even briefly, then she'd do it. But she would protect her heart like glass in a thunderstorm. The room smelled like citrus wipes and fresh toner. Every surface gleamed with stainless steel and white laminate. The ceiling had a mural of clouds, but the lighting was surgical. Kaylan stood with his hands in his pockets, silent as the nurse entered with a clipboard and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Ready? Nyla nodded. She wasn't. Kaylan reached for her hand. You don't have to do this. She looked up at him. But you want me to. I want this with you because you matter to me. You're not just anyone. Right, she said softly, squeezing his hand once before lying back on the exam chair. As the technician dimmed the lights and slid on gloves, Kaylan whispered, "Thank you for doing this with me." And that was the moment Nyla made her second silent vow. First vow, don't expect love. Second vow, if he ever gives it, it won't be because you begged. You're glowing, Jaleesa said, balancing her almond milk latte on one thigh. Nyla stared down at her small bump. It still felt surreal, like she was carrying a secret that only kicked when the world wasn't looking. I'm tired, hungry every 3 hours, and this child is disrespectful at 3 a.m., Nyla muttered. Jaleesa tilted her head. But you still said yes to him. Why? Nyla hesitated. Because I love him. Because I thought maybe, just maybe, this would bring him closer. Because a baby is still a piece of him. Because I'm tired of being the one who's always waiting. Instead, she just said, I trust him. That's not the same as loving him, I know. Jaleesa's expression softened. Nyla, you don't need to earn his affection by giving him something sacred. Your womb isn't a down payment on his heart. Nyla looked away. She already knew that. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. Kaylan had started calling more, bringing her prenatal vitamins, adding her cravings to his Instacart orders. He dropped off a silk robe one evening after noticing her frayed pajama sleeve during a Zoom call. No note, just a box on her doorstep with the label, "You deserve better." She laughed when she opened it. This man just CEO'd my sleepwear. Still, he never crossed the emotional line. No late-night texts. No, "How are you feeling?" calls just to hear her voice. No invitations that weren't task-related. But sometimes when she spoke, she caught him staring too long. Like he was trying to read between words she hadn't said. Like he felt something, but didn't want to admit it. 6 months in, her belly round, her feet sore, and her cravings unreasonable. "Mangoes and barbecue chips?" Kaylin asked, handing her a brown paper bag. "Do you want me to grab a fire extinguisher too?" "I like the mix of sweet and salty." Nyla grinned, propping her feet up on the couch. "Like your personality." He raised a brow. "Excuse me? You're sweet to me, but salty to the world." He chuckled. The kind of laugh she hadn't heard in years. The kind that made her ache. Then, without saying a word, Kaylin knelt in front of her. He lifted one foot, slipped a slipper on, then did the other. "You're spoiling me," she whispered. He looked up. "Someone should," he replied quietly. Then his hand moved to her belly, and she felt it, light, quick, but undeniable. A kick. "She kicked," he said, stunned. "She always does when she hears your voice." He looked at her then, not with logic, not with control, but with longing. And before Nyla could process what was happening, Kaylin leaned in and kissed her. Soft, slow, careful, the kind of kiss that asked a question and gave no answer. He pulled back like he'd been burned. "I shouldn't have done that." Nyla nodded, heart racing. "It's okay," she said, her voice steady. "I knew what this was." He stood, grabbed his coat, and left. No explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. The silence in Nyla's apartment wasn't empty. It echoed with the weight of things unspoken. For 2 weeks, she heard nothing from Kaylin. No texts, no check-ins, no food deliveries with passive, aggressive sticky notes. Just space. And space had never felt so loud. "He kissed you, then ghosted you?" Jaleesa hissed, nearly choking on her tea. Nyla shrugged, tugging her cardigan closed around her growing bump. "He didn't ghost me. He paused." Jaleesa blinked. "You sound like you're explaining away a software glitch. Isn't that what he does for a living?" Jaleesa frowned. "You think he's processing what happened?" Nyla hesitated. "I think he's scared of what it meant. And what did it mean to you?" "Everything," Nyla thought. But she said, "Nothing. Just hormones and proximity. We were too close for too long." Lies tasted bitter on her tongue. Jaleesa crossed her arms. "Let me tell you what I see. You kissed a man who's known you for over a decade. A man who trusts you with his child but not with his heart. And now he's hiding." Again, Nyla's throat tightened. "He doesn't owe me romance." "But you owe yourself clarity," Jaleesa said softly. "Don't let this be another season of silence. Not when you're carrying both your future and his." 2 weeks and 4 days after the kiss, Nyla stood in her doctor's office, awaiting her third trimester scan. She wasn't expecting company. She definitely wasn't expecting him. But when the nurse opened the door and said, "Miss Harmon, your partner is here," Nyla turned and nearly dropped her purse. Kaylin stood there, clean-shaven, nervous, holding a glass vase filled with white orchids. "I didn't know how to fix what I broke," he said quietly. "You didn't break anything," Nyla replied, voice firm. "You just reminded me not to expect more." His expression cracked for a moment, but then he nodded. "Can I stay? For the scan?" She hesitated, then motioned him in. During the ultrasound, he held her hand, squeezed it when the heartbeat fluttered across the screen. And when the technician said, "She's healthy, strong, and photogenic," Kaylin laughed like a man who hadn't laughed in weeks. But after they left, he didn't ask to come upstairs, didn't offer dinner, didn't linger, just walked her to the door and said, "Thank you." And Nyla, too tired to hurt, smiled politely, then closed the door. Emery Rose Reeve entered the world 3 weeks ahead of schedule. It was storming that night. Thunder rattled the windows of the delivery suite, and Nyla gritted through contractions like a woman possessed. Kaylin was there. He held her hand, wiped her forehead, whispered, I've never seen anything braver," as she pushed through the pain. And when the doctor placed a crying caramel-skinned girl on her chest, Nyla sobbed, not from pain, but because the one thing that had never failed her in love was the baby born from it. Emery's eyes blinked open, deep brown with flecks of amber. Kaylin kissed both their foreheads and whispered, "Welcome home." For the first few months, CO parenting was smooth, efficient. Kaylin showed up with bottles, lullabies, and tech-enabled baby monitors. He never missed a doctor's visit, never forgot a milestone, and never stayed longer than necessary. There were moments, soft pauses when he'd tuck Emery into Nyla's arms and linger a second too long. But he never reached for her hand, never stayed for dinner. They functioned like a well-oiled machine. But Nyla didn't want a machine. She wanted the man. Nyla stood at the kitchen window, Emery cooing in her bassinet beside her. The apartment smelled like lavender oil and breast milk. Jaleesa sat cross-legged on the rug, folding onesies with machine, like precision. "You love him," she said without looking up. Nyla didn't respond. "You love him," Jaleesa repeated. "And he's a coward. He gave me a daughter," Nyla said softly. "He gave you half of what you wanted," Jaleesa corrected. "And you're pretending that's enough." Nyla turned away. "It is enough." "No, it's not," Jaleesa snapped. "Stop shrinking your love to fit the space he's willing to give." Silence settled between them, and then Nyla whispered, "If he never says he loves me, it doesn't mean I was wrong to love him." "No," Jaleesa agreed, "but it means he wasn't brave enough to love you back. And you deserve more than a man too scared to name his own heart." That night, Nyla couldn't sleep. She watched Emery breathe, listened to the rain tap the window, then reached for her journal and began to write. Not to Kaylin, but to herself. "You loved purely, you gave gently, and if he never sees it, it doesn't make your love less real. But you deserve someone who sees you in full light, not shadow. Don't confuse comfort with commitment. Don't call his absence patience. Let your love be the reason you rise, not the thing that keeps you stuck." She closed the journal, tucked it under her pillow, kissed her daughter's cheek. The next morning, Kaylin arrived with a new toy, a techie baby swing that played Beethoven. Nyla accepted it, handed him Emery, and said quietly, "We need to talk." His eyes sharpened. "Is something wrong?" She reached into her cardigan and held out a folded page. "My words, not an attack, just a truth I've been avoiding." He took it, read it, in silence. His expression didn't change, until it did, until his eyes glassed over and his jaw tightened, and he said, "I need a minute." She left him in the nursery. 10 minutes later, she felt arms around her waist from behind. "I read your words," Kaylin whispered, "and they broke me." She didn't turn. "Kaylin, I don't know how to be good at love, Nyla. I never saw it growing up. I don't know how to give it without feeling like I'm handing someone a knife." "I never asked for a weapon," she said, voice shaking. "Just your presence, your honesty. I don't know how to be enough. You already are." He turned her around, looked her full in the face, and finally said the words she'd waited 12 years to hear, "I love you." Have you ever loved someone in silence, only for them to finally notice when you were ready to let go? Share your story in the comments. Your truth might be the strength someone else needs. And if Nyla's quiet courage moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories. The morning after Kaylin said "I love you," the sun rose brighter than it had in weeks, but Nyla couldn't bring herself to believe it was a new day yet. She stood barefoot in the kitchen, robe loosely tied, Emery bouncing in her sling against her chest as she stirred oatmeal. Her eyes flicked toward the clock, 6:42 a.m., the time he usually arrived to drop off organic baby food and updates from Emery's pediatrician. Except this time, he wasn't outside the door. He was in her bed. Kaylin had stayed the night. Not for intimacy, not for convenience, but because after speaking the words that had eluded him for over a decade, he hadn't wanted to let go of her hand. He'd fallen asleep on the couch, legs too long for the cushions. Emery nestled beside him in her carrier, snoring like a small, happy puppy. When Nyla walked into the living room that morning, she found him there, shirt wrinkled, one sock missing, his fingers loosely curled near Emery's tiny fist, and her chest cracked open all over again. He was trying. The scent of sage scrambled eggs and freshly brewed vanilla coffee filled the kitchen. Kaylin had insisted on making brunch. He stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, wristwatch still on, flipping pancakes as if he hadn't spent most of his adult life in boardrooms and billion-dollar merger negotiations. "You know," Nyla said, leaning on the counter, "for a man who once asked if paprika was a software plugin, you're doing all right in the kitchen." He looked over his shoulder and smiled. "I've been watching videos." "Jaleesa's fault." "Oh?" Nyla raised a brow. "She threatened to revoke my co-parenting privileges if I didn't learn to cook eggs without Googling it first." Nyla chuckled, surprised. She really said that, word for word, and she used that voice. Nyla laughed harder. It felt easy, too easy, and that scared her. She poured orange juice into 2 glasses and took a long sip, then said, carefully, "Last night, when you said you loved me, did you mean it or was it a moment thing? Like emotion overload from reading my letter?" Kaylin set the spatula down and turned off the stove. Then he walked over, took both her hands, and looked her dead in the eyes. "I meant it. I've meant it for a long time. I just never had the courage to face what loving you might change. And now I'm terrified," he admitted. "But I'm more terrified of waking up one day and realizing I lost you because I was too afraid to try." Nyla's lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she squeezed his hands and said, "Then let's try." They began slow. Kaylin didn't rush into romance. He didn't start bringing flowers or candlelit dinners overnight. Instead, he showed up. Every day, he learned how to braid Emery's soft curls without pulling. He installed baby gates across both apartments, read parenting books Nyla recommended, and joined her on morning walks in Central Park, with Emery strapped between them in a double harness. Their conversations deepened. One night, Nyla asked him, "What did love look like in your childhood?" Kaylin answered after a long pause. "Silent. My father believed in performance. My mother loved me, but she loved him more. I always thought love was what you gave up for success, not something that lived beside it." Nyla nodded. She understood, maybe too well. Her own father had loved deeply but worked himself into an early grave trying to prove he was worth the space he took up. Love, for both of them, had always been heavy. Now, it had to become soft. The first challenge came when Kaylin's company released their annual investor portfolio. A press photo surfaced of Kaylin, Nyla, and Emery on a casual Sunday walk. Within hours, tech blogs lit up with speculation. Mystery mother of tech CEO's child? From Platonic to parenting? Inside Kaylin Reeves' secret family life? Nyla read the headlines with a heavy stomach. She hadn't signed up to be anyone's PR narrative. She hadn't even told her co-workers she was involved with Kaylin beyond being a friend. Now her face was plastered next to his on finance sites, with headlines that screamed about things she hadn't even processed yet. Kaylin came over that evening looking furious. "I didn't authorize those shots. They were taken by a freelancer and sold to Tab Tech. They know my name," Nyla whispered. "My job. My address." Kaylin's fists clenched. "I'll have my legal team issue a takedown demand. We can also put out a joint statement." "Only if you want." She hesitated. "Or we can say nothing," he added. "You don't owe the world a version of us we haven't figured out yet." That softened her. "Let's wait," she said. And they did. But the boundary had been tested, and not for the last time. One Friday night, Emery refused to sleep. She cried for 2 straight hours. Nyla paced the apartment with her. Then Kaylin took over. Then Nyla again. By midnight, they sat on the couch, Emery asleep between them. Nyla leaned against Kaylin's shoulder. "This is the hardest, beautiful thing I've ever done." He turned and kissed her temple. "Same." She didn't ask what he meant. Because in that moment, they were a family. Not defined by rings, not by titles, just by love. "I'm happy for you," cautiously, Jaleesa said, crossing her arms as she watched Nyla nurse Emery on the sofa. Nyla raised a brow. You sound like a walking butt. Jaleesa tilted her head. Because I am. You and Kaylin are clearly in this weird, beautiful, fragile stage, and I don't want to see you lose yourself in it. Nyla didn't flinch. I'm not lost. No, but you've spent years orbiting his gravity. Just be careful that he's not pulling you in again, only to push you away once the emotional weight settles. Nyla sighed. He's different now. Trying. Honest. Jaleesa wasn't convinced. Even the most brilliant men can confuse guilt for love. That stuck with Nyla. Later that night, as she lay beside Kaylin while Emery snored gently in her bassinet, she whispered into the dark, "Are you sure this isn't about obligation?" Kaylin rolled over. "No. If this was obligation, I'd be trying to run from it. But I'm running toward you." She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Then keep running." It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Nyla was at her desk, grading online applications for a youth coding program she directed, when a calendar notification pinged. Dinner with Harper, 6 p.m., Gotham Club. Harper. His ex, the one he never spoke of. Nyla blinked, confused. The reminder had come through their shared parenting calendar. Had he meant to send that to someone else? When Kaylin arrived to pick up Emery, Nyla was calm, mostly. "You have dinner plans tonight?" He blinked. "Oh, yes." "With Harper? Did you mean to send that to me?" Kaylin hesitated. "It's just dinner. Business." She reached out about a foundation grant. "I didn't think it was worth bringing up." Nyla's heart twisted. "You didn't think your ex reaching out to you, after everything, was worth mentioning." Kaylin's jaw clenched. "Because I didn't want to make you feel insecure. That's not your choice to make for me, Kaylin. That's my choice to process." With the truth, silence stretched between them. "I'll cancel," he said. "No," she replied. "Keep it. But don't lie again. Not by omission." He nodded. "You're right. I'm still learning." Nyla nodded too. But that night, while Emery slept and the rain beat gently against the windows, Nyla wrote in her journal again. "Even good men can make bad decisions when they're afraid of confrontation. I want honesty, even when it's messy, because love that walks on eggshells never lasts." The decision wasn't planned. They were in Prospect Park, Emery in a pink sun hat, cooing beneath a cherry blossom tree. A passerby, an influencer or someone pretending to be, snapped a photo. Kaylin noticed. This time, he didn't flinch. Instead, he pulled Nyla close, kissed her temple, and said, "Let them see us." Later that day, he posted the photo to his private account with a caption that read, "My heart doesn't live in boardrooms. She lives in tiny socks, midnight feedings, and the woman who made me believe in softness again." Nyla saw it 2 hours later. She didn't cry, but she did print it, fold it, and slip it into the back of her journal. It wasn't grand. It wasn't whispered during a kiss or a milestone. It was spoken between bites of a turkey sandwich on a random Tuesday afternoon, while Kaylin held Emery with mashed peas on his shirt. Nyla looked at him, disheveled, tired, glowing, and said, "I love you." He looked stunned, and then he smiled. "I know." She smirked. "You're not supposed to say that like Han Solo." He kissed her. "I'll spend the rest of our lives proving it." When Kaylin's father visited from out of state, Nyla offered to host a dinner. He was everything Kaylin had described: rigid, stoic, dry. "You left MIT for software development?" he asked Kaylin across the table. Kaylin nodded. "And I built an empire." The older man's lips twitched. "Yes, but no wife." Nyla cleared her throat. "He has a daughter." The man's gaze turned to her. "Yes." Out of wedlock. Nyla didn't blink. Out of love. That night, after his father left, Kaylin stood in the kitchen, back against the fridge, shoulders tight. "You didn't have to defend me," he muttered. "Yes, I did." He looked at her. "That's what love does, huh?" She nodded. "That's what family does." They took a weekend trip to the Catskills. Nothing fancy. Just the three of them. No nannies, no laptops, no headlines. Kaylin lit a fire each night. Nyla read aloud from baby books. Emery learned to crawl on a cabin rug. On the last night, Kaylin whispered as they lay in bed, "This is the life I never knew I needed." Nyla kissed his cheek. "This is the life you always deserved. You just never thought you were allowed to want it." He looked at her, raw. "I want it with you." A spring breeze carried the scent of lilacs through the open window of Nyla's apartment. Outside, the city hummed, horns blaring, kids laughing, birds insisting on being louder than both. Inside, Emery's chubby fingers banged a wooden spoon on her high-chair tray, gurgling with pride. Kaylin sat across from her, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, a soft contrast to his usual polished self. His laptop remained closed, his attention undivided. He had learned to ignore emails after 5 p.m., something Nyla never thought she'd witness. Nyla sipped her tea, watching them, and her heart ached, in that strange, beautiful way that only came when you realized you wanted something forever. She wanted this, all of it, not just the baby, not just the man beside her, but a life with all three of them, entangled, permanent. But love had always been temporary for her. Her own parents had started strong and ended in silence. She didn't want silence, not with Kaylin, not with Emery. She wanted more. Nyla found Kaylin folding baby clothes in the nursery. He was terrible at it. Emery's onesies looked more like dumplings than rectangles, but he kept trying. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. "Do you see this as permanent?" He looked up. "What? Us? This? Are we playing house or building one?" Kaylin blinked, then set the clothes down. "I want this to last," he said, "but I'm still figuring out what forever looks like." Nyla stepped closer. "Forever isn't a map. It's a choice you make every day." He exhaled. "Then I'm choosing it, every day, even on the hard ones." She nodded. "Okay, then let's start talking about the next step." He froze. "You mean marriage?" "I mean stability, legal guardianship, a plan. If something happens to me, I want to know you won't have to fight for her." Kaylin went quiet. "Then, you think like a woman who's had to do too much alone." Nyla half smiled. "And you love like a man who never learned how to stay." They stood there for a long beat. Then he said, "I'll call my lawyer in the morning. We'll draft papers, guardianship, shared custody, whatever gives you peace." She stepped into his arms. "Peace looks a lot like this," she whispered. Kaylin's phone rang 3 times before he picked up. He stepped onto the balcony. Nyla didn't eavesdrop, but she didn't have to. When he came back in, his face was tight, his jaw stiff. "That was Harper," he said. Nyla waited. "She offered me a spot on her tech philanthropy board. Said she thinks it would be good for optics." "And you?" Nyla asked. "I told her I don't do anything for optics anymore." She arched a brow. He walked over, cupped her face. "I want to be known for who I am, not who I was. And this, you and Emery, this is who I am." "You know it's getting real when he starts saying we more than I," Jaleesa said, sipping a mango smoothie on Nyla's couch. Nyla grinned. "I caught him practicing our bedroom the other day." Look at that. CEO, becoming a partner." Nyla paused. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Believing in him again?" Jaleesa looked at her. "I think you were always ready to love him fully. You just needed to wait until he could love you back without conditions." Nyla smiled. It felt good to be seen. It felt even better to be believed in. Peace, it turned out, was heavy too. There were quiet mornings, shared giggles, baby milestones and soft kisses. But there were also missed calls from Kaylin's board, sudden meetings, and moments where he grew distant, not in anger, but in thought. Nyla noticed. One night she asked, "Do you still feel like you're living your own life?" He paused. "Sometimes I feel like I'm finally living it, and the other times," he exhaled, "I'm scared I won't be enough for either world." She reached for his hand. "Then let's build a world that fits us." He nodded, but the pressure, unspoken, still lingered. Nyla stood in the hallway outside Emery's infant Montessori program, eyeing the bright sign-in board, still in her soft office flats and blazer. She clutched a Tupperware of cut fruit and hummed softly to herself, trying not to worry that she hadn't packed Emery's favorite blanket. Kaylin appeared beside her without warning, in jeans, with a matching fruit tray. Nyla blinked. "Are we fruit twins?" He lifted his container. "Organic blueberries and mango, because my daughter has taste." They smiled. They were growing into something calm, unforced, lived in, but not yet defined. And that was the problem. Kaylin slid into the booth across from her, both of them sipping cinnamon oat lattes. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling a tablet from his satchel. "I want to update our co-parenting agreement." Nyla blinked. "Update? What's wrong with it?" "Nothing. But I want to add joint decision-making on school choices, doctor changes, travel permissions. Also, you should have permanent emergency proxy over me." She narrowed her eyes. "That sounds a lot like married responsibilities." He met her gaze evenly. "It sounds like partnership, even if we don't wear rings yet. Yet, I'm saying I'm in this. With you. For real." Nyla set her cup down. "Kaylin, do you feel like we're already a couple?" He hesitated. "We're a family, and I love you. So yes. But..." She pressed. "But I still feel like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop." Her silence said he wasn't wrong. That night, over roasted chicken and asparagus, Nyla asked him a question that had been chewing at her for weeks. "If we're partners, truly, then when do we take the next step? Not just emotionally, but legally." Kaylin looked up from his plate. "You mean marriage?" "Yes." He exhaled. "Nyla, I'm not afraid of marrying you. I'm afraid of marrying you and ruining what we have." She nodded slowly. "So, we're real, but we're on pause?" "No," he said gently. "We're moving forward. I just need more time." And just like that, the temperature in the room dropped, not out of anger, but out of quiet ache. "You need to stop holding your breath," Jaleesa said, while folding Emery's laundry. Nyla raised a brow. "I'm not." "You are. You're still living like this love has a countdown clock, like he's going to change his mind at any moment." Nyla sighed. "He's being careful." "Yeah. But at what point does careful become cowardly?" Nyla didn't respond, because the truth was, she didn't know anymore. It was a late afternoon when Harper showed up at Nyla's door. Nyla opened it cautiously, Emery on her hip. Harper, tall and sharp in a grey trench coat, offered a small smile. "I'm not here to make trouble. I just wanted to apologize." Nyla said nothing. Harper sighed. "When Kaylin and I were together, he wasn't capable of love. Not real love. He feared it like fire, and I blamed myself for that." "I'm not interested in post-mortems," Nyla said gently. "I know. I just thought, if you ever doubt that he's changed, know this. He never made space for anyone before. But he made space for you." Then she turned and walked away. Nyla closed the door with a racing heart, not because of Harper's visit, but because a part of her needed to hear it. He found it in a boutique in Soho, a minimalist rose gold band with a single offset sapphire. He didn't buy it that day. He stared at it, then walked out. He was close, so close, but still scared of losing the fragile piece they'd built. One Thursday morning, Emery spiked a fever. Nyla rushed her to the pediatrician, dialing Kaylin between every red light. He didn't pick up, not once. She left 4 voicemails, pacing the waiting room as Emery whined in her arms. When he finally called back 3 hours later, Nyla was livid. "Where were you?" "In a board meeting. She had a 102.6 fever, and I couldn't reach you. I'm sorry, I didn't see the calls." "That's not good enough, Kaylin. Being a parent isn't part-time. You said you were in this." "I am." "Then act like it." The line went quiet. "I'll be there in 15, he said quietly. When he arrived, Emery was already asleep in Nyla's arms. He sat beside her, said nothing, just stroked Emery's curls, and whispered, "I don't know how to be perfect, but I'm not walking away." That night, Kaylin returned to her apartment. He stood in the hallway like a child in time out. "I know I failed today. Nyla folded her arms. It wasn't just today, it's the accumulation of little silences, missed moments. I don't want to miss anything. Then stop being afraid of making it official. Kaylin walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small velvet box. Nyla froze. Don't propose because you feel cornered, she said softly. He opened the box, but it was empty. I was going to, but not like this. He looked at her. Give me the chance to do it right, not to check a box, but because I'm ready. All the way, Nyla nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm not asking for a ring, she whispered. I'm asking for clarity. It happened in the living room. Nyla was holding out her arms. Kaylin was sitting behind her, holding a phone camera. Emery wobbled forward, 1 foot. 2, stumble, then 3 more, into Nyla's arms. They both screamed with laughter and tears. Later that night, Nyla looked over at Kaylin on the couch and said, She's growing fast. So are we, he whispered. And for the first time, she believed him. Nyla sat cross-legged on the floor of her bedroom, Emery napping peacefully in her crib. Around her were pages, years of journals she'd filled since high school, handwritten stories, prayers, heartbreaks, and reflections. She was organizing them for storage, but paused on one dated exactly 5 years ago. It read, He doesn't see me, but I see him. Not the man on magazine covers, but the one who gets quiet when he's overwhelmed, the one who shows up with soup when I'm sick but never stays. I love a man I'll never touch. And yet I remain. She stared at that line a long while. I remain, but not anymore. Now she was standing. Now she had Emery. Now she had Kaylin, half committed, but further than he'd ever gone. Her heart hoped, but it didn't beg anymore. Kaylin sat in the armchair of his therapist's office, staring out the window. I used to think love was about achievement, he said quietly, that if I made the right moves, built the right company, became the most logical person in the room, I'd earn it. Like a bonus check. Dr. Isaacs nodded. And Nyla? Kaylin exhaled. She made it clear, love isn't earned, it's offered. But my brain doesn't know what to do with unconditional things. It goes straight to fear. So when she asks for clarity, your instinct is to protect uncertainty. Exactly. Do you love her? He didn't hesitate. More than I know how to say. Then don't say it, the therapist said. Show it. Build a life that doesn't make her question it. Nyla set the table. Simple pasta, garlic bread, and roasted veggies. Kaylin was late. Not unusual. But lately, every minute ticked louder. He finally arrived, just as Emery was nodding off in her chair. Sorry, he said, brushing a kiss across Nyla's cheek. She nodded, but her eyes were quiet. They ate in near silence. Halfway through the meal, Kaylin said, I saw Dr. Isaacs today. Nyla looked up. Oh, he told me not to promise, just to act. So I'm acting. He pulled a folder from his satchel and handed it to her. Inside, completed guardianship paperwork, shared custody agreements, an updated will naming Nyla and Emery as beneficiaries, and a drafted trust. Nyla's breath caught. This isn't a proposal, he said, but it's a declaration that you are my family. On paper, in life, in legacy. Nyla wiped a tear before it fell. Thank you. The next morning, Nyla opened her inbox to a message from Emery's daycare director. Subject, Incident Report. The email described a moment where Emery had wandered unnoticed to the exit gate, unlocked. A teacher found her seconds before she reached the sidewalk. Nyla's blood went cold. She called Kaylin immediately. I'm pulling her out, she said. Agreed, he replied. They spent the day researching alternatives, reviewing nanny agencies, and rearranging their schedules. And for the first time, they didn't argue. They planned. Together. That night, Nyla found a new journal on her pillow. Soft leather, deep green. Inside, the first page was filled in Kaylin's handwriting. For the woman who never needed to be seen to be valuable, but deserves to be seen every single day anyway. Let this book hold every version of your brilliance. Love, Kale. She pressed the cover to her chest. No ring, no roses. But this, This was real. The following week felt different, not because of anything grand or dramatic, but because of the small, consistent things. Kalen didn't just show up, he was present. He stopped checking his phone at dinner. He bathed Emery every other night. He read bedtime stories with voices, laughter, and effort. And Nyla noticed. It wasn't perfection, but it was intention. She'd once read that love is not built by grand declarations, but by tiny daily decisions. And now, Kalen was deciding, over and over again. It had been months since Nyla's mother visited. The woman was gentle but sharp, loving, yet always just one sentence away from cutting through pretenses. She entered the apartment, carrying a pie and 1,000 observations. "I see you've upgraded your co-parenting arrangement," she said, eyes lingering on Kalen helping Emery into her jumper. Kalen smiled, "Working on my toddler bootcamp badge." Her mother raised a brow at Nyla once he left the room. "He's better looking than I remember, Mom, but is he better acting than he used to be?" Nyla sighed. "Yes, he's trying." Her mother nodded, then sat down at the kitchen island. "Then just be sure you're not pouring your full self into someone still deciding if he's thirsty." Nyla didn't reply, because for once she wasn't sure. It rained that night, heavy and sudden. Emery slept soundly, but Nyla couldn't. She stood at the window, arms folded, watching the city lights blur in the downpour. Kalen approached behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head, thinking about what happens next. He kissed the back of her neck. "Next is whatever we choose. I need to know we're not just reacting, that we're being intentional." Kalen turned her gently to face him. "I've spent most of my life reacting, building walls, dodging feelings. But now, I'm not running. I'm choosing you." She studied him. "Then, let's stop drifting in the direction of someday. Let's chart a course." The next morning, Kalen received a call from a major tech media outlet requesting an exclusive interview. The catch? They wanted to frame it around his surprising family life. He declined, without asking Nyla. When he told her later, she paused. "Why didn't you ask me first? I didn't want to drag you into PR nonsense. But I am part of your story, and if we're building something real, I need to feel like an equal, like my voice matters." Kalen nodded. "You're right." She touched his hand. "You protected me. But next time, protect us by including me." They had planned a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them, but Kalen got stuck on a late investor call. Nyla ate alone. She wasn't angry, but when he arrived, apologetic and flustered, she simply said, "I'm not mad, but I need consistency. Not just promises." Kalen nodded, breathless. "I'll do better." They didn't go to get married. They went to file the custody agreement officially. While there, Nyla noticed Kalen watching a young couple exchange vows. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers, and she squeezed back. Later that evening, he pulled her onto the balcony and whispered, "I watched them and realized, I want that. But not just the ceremony, the knowing. That whatever storm comes, we're anchored." Nyla's eyes filled. "So, what are we waiting for?" He kissed her forehead. Not much longer. It was nothing serious, just a fever that wouldn't break and an alarming cough that sent them back to urgent care. Emery lay limp in Nyla's arms, Kalen pacing the waiting room with bloodshot eyes. When the nurse called them in, he didn't speak. When the doctor said it was a stubborn viral infection and nothing worse, he exhaled as though he'd been underwater for days. That night, back home, after putting Emery down, Kalen held Nyla so tightly she could barely breathe. "I was so scared," he whispered. "I know. I can't lose either of you. You won't." And she meant it. At a conference gala 2 weeks later, Kalen stood to receive a leadership award. He wore the usual suit, delivered the usual brilliance. But then he paused. "And lastly, to the two people who've redefined love for me, my daughter Emery and the woman whose strength carries both of us, Nyla Harmon. Thank you for being my clarity." The audience applauded. "Nyla, watching from the back of the room, tried not to cry. But she failed. It wasn't grand. There was no candlelight, no crowd, just their living room. Emery asleep. Soft jazz humming in the background. Kaelan knelt with a small velvet box, not empty this time. "Nyla," he said, "I used to think success would make me feel full, but it was you. You and Emery. I don't want to wait for the perfect moment anymore. This is the perfect moment." She covered her mouth, then nodded. "Yes," she whispered. And for the first time in her life, Nyla felt like the story didn't just happen to her. She had chosen it. Nyla woke to soft sunlight kissing the curtains, the scent of baby lotion in the air, and a diamond ring glinting faintly on her finger. She hadn't taken it off, not even for sleep. Kaelan lay beside her, one arm curled under his head, the other resting gently on the crib where Emery was stirring, babbling softly in her sleep. There were no fireworks, no social media posts, no congratulatory texts, just peace. And for the first time in years, Nyla felt like she could exhale. She wasn't dreaming anymore. He finally asked. Jalisa's voice pitched upward as she leaned across the brunch table. Nyla nodded, stirring her chai. "Last night, in the living room, just the three of us. No camera crew, no violins. Girl, you didn't need violins. You needed him to see you. And it sounds like he finally does." Nyla smiled softly. "It's strange. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but I just feel settled." "Because you didn't win him," Jalisa said. "You waited for him to rise to your level, and now that he has, it feels natural." Nyla bit her lip. "Is it weird that I still feel afraid?" Jalisa shook her head. "No, babe. Real love is scary because it's not a performance, it's presence. And presence means being seen even when you're not perfect." Kaelan and Nyla didn't rush. There was no pressure to choose a venue, no color schemes or floral samples yet. Instead, they started where it mattered most: the will, the apartment lease, the school district transfer. They sat together at the dining table, Emery tossing toys nearby, and laid out what a future rooted in stability looked like. Kaelan took the lead, drafted new emergency contacts, added Nyla to his company insurance, asked her about a joint savings plan. Nyla asked about therapy continuation, emotional safety, boundaries with work and parenting. They didn't avoid the hard questions, and that, more than anything, made her believe. That night, while Kaelan rocked Emery to sleep in her lavender-scented nursery, Nyla opened her nightstand drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was addressed to Kaelan. She had written it a year ago, before the embryo transfer, before the first kiss, before Emery. It read, "If you're reading this, it means I finally had the courage to leave, not because I don't love you, but because loving you in silence is breaking me. I hope one day you realize I never needed grand gestures. I only ever wanted to be chosen without conditions." She read it 3 times, then tore it in half, then again, and again, until it was just paper and closure. Nyla's mother and father visited for the first time since Emery's birth. Her mother eyed the ring. Her father, ever quiet, held Emery in his arms and hummed an old gospel tune. "He looks changed," her mother said later as they sipped tea on the balcony. "He is," Nyla said. "And you?" Nyla thought a moment. "I stopped waiting to be loved the way I deserved, and that's when he finally learned how." Her mother smiled. "Then he's a lucky man. They didn't hire a celebrity planner. Just a simple appointment with a coordinator at a modest venue downtown." Nyla brought a 3-ring binder and a pen. Kaelan brought a tablet and coffee. "I feel like I'm on a project team," he joked. Nyla grinned. "You kind of are. Only difference is if you mess up, you sleep on the couch." They sat side by side, sorting through dates, guest list sizes, and budget limits. "We don't need extravagant," Nyla said, flipping through floral photos. "We just need honest." Kaelan nodded. "And full of joy." The planner looked between them and smiled. "You two make this easy." Nyla leaned over and whispered, "Don't get too comfortable. We haven't picked colors yet." Nyla took Kaelan and Emery to her childhood neighborhood on a breezy Sunday. Rows of brownstones, corner stores with faded awnings, kids jumping rope in driveways. "This," she said, "is where I learned resilience." She showed him the playground where she scraped her knees at 5, the bodega where she used to buy icy drinks after school, the community center where her father taught local kids math. It wasn't fancy, she said, holding Emery's hand, but it was full of love. Kaylin took her hand and whispered, "Now I see where yours comes from." It happened during a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Kaylin had been on back-to-back calls. Nyla was solo parenting all day. The apartment was a mess, Emery was cranky, and the doorbell wouldn't stop ringing with deliveries for wedding vendors. When Kaylin finally walked in, Nyla barely looked up. "You okay?" he asked, peeling off his jacket. "I'm tired. I can take her." "It's not about that, Kaylin. It's about everything. The pressure, the planning, the pretending." He froze. "Pretending?" She sighed. "Not about us. About trying to make this day into something bigger than what it is. I want the marriage, not the production." Kaylin walked over and took her hands. "Then let's change it. Scrap the fluff. Keep what matters. Just us and those we love." She looked up at him, worn but present. "Really? Really?" And just like that, the noise quieted. They were in the park. Nyla was laying out a picnic blanket. Kaylin was fiddling with Emery's shoes. And suddenly, clear as a bell, "Mama." Then, "Dada." They both froze. Emery giggled, like she'd cracked the code of the universe. Nyla burst into tears. Kaylin lifted Emery high and laughed so hard his chest shook. "We've been promoted," he whispered. "No longer just co-parents. We're her whole world now." Instead of a huge ballroom, they booked a restored greenhouse on the edge of the city. Nyla found a dress that was sleek, simple, and golden-toned like sunrise. Kaylin chose an open-collar suit and no tie. Emery was the flower girl, barefoot and grinning. They sent digital invites with a single line, no drama, just love. Jaleesa officiated. Kaylin wrote his vows like code, logical, layered, then utterly vulnerable. "You weren't my plan. You were my pause, my breath, my mirror. I spent my life trying to optimize everything. You taught me how to feel." Nyla's vows were handwritten and messy. "You saw me long after I gave up trying to be seen. You didn't rescue me. You walked beside me until I healed. And now, I'm not afraid to walk beside you, too." Their first dance wasn't to a live band. Just a playlist Kaylin built over months of memory-making. As they swayed, Emery tugged at their legs and then eventually joined between them, tiny arms wrapping both waists. Jaleesa leaned over to one of the guests and whispered, "This isn't just love. This is what survival looks like when it finds softness. No flight, no getaway." They returned home to their own apartment, to a sleepy Emery and leftover cake. Kaylin kicked off his shoes, pulled off his jacket, and flopped on the couch. Nyla sat beside him and rested her head on his chest. "No more hiding," she whispered. "No more waiting," he replied. And in the quiet glow of their living room, they began their forever, not with fireworks, but with peace. Nyla, months later, sitting with Emery on her lap, reading from a new journal. The entry says, "He waited, I waited. And somewhere in the waiting, we both learned how to show up, not perfect, not polished, but present. And that's enough." Have you ever waited for love? Not the fairy tale, but the kind that grows through silence, doubt, and finally, choosing each other. Share your story in the comments. Someone might be holding on, waiting for hope, just like you once did. And if Nyla and Kaylin's journey touched you, like, comment, and subscribe to Mr. Charles' Stories. Because real love isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits in the shadows until it's safe to bloom. The clinking of utensils and the buzz of conversation filled the Brooklyn cafe as Nyla waited, her fingers curled around a lukewarm coffee cup she hadn't sipped in 10 minutes. Across from her, Jaleesa was mid-rant. "I'm just saying, Nyla, you need to start naming what this is. You and Kaylin are, what, co-parents? Lovers? Best friends with a baby and unresolved tension? Girl, you can't float forever." Nyla stirred her coffee slowly. "We're figuring it out." Jaleesa arched an eyebrow. "That man has kissed you, confessed love, slept on your couch, fixed your thermostat, braided your baby's hair, and still hasn't asked you to be his woman. What exactly are y'all figuring out? I don't want to push him, Nyla murmured. He's trying. Therapy's helping. He's opening up more. But is he opening doors or just peeking through the keyhole? That landed hard. Because Jaleesa wasn't wrong. Yes, things had changed. Kaylin had become softer with her, more intentional. There were spontaneous dinners, family walks, whispered apologies in the dark when he held her too tightly during a night terror. He even left post-it notes on her fridge like you're a superhero. Don't forget that. But something still hovered between them, a quiet hesitation he never fully named. And lately, Nyla had begun to wonder if love alone was enough. Kaylin invited her to his office. Just lunch, he'd said on the phone. Nothing fancy, but when Nyla stepped off the private elevator and into the executive floor of Orion Technologies, it felt like anything but casual. The reception area gleamed with chrome and glass. A massive screen behind the desk looped footage from Kaylin's last keynote address. And everyone stared at her. She caught her reflection in a hallway mirror. Wide-leg slacks, cream blouse, light makeup, hair in a twist-out bun. Professional, but still soft. Still her. She followed his assistant to the boardroom, where Kaylin waited with sushi and pressed juice. You didn't have to go all out, she teased, sliding into the seat beside him. He shrugged. You've never seen my world up close. I wanted you to... Nyla glanced around. This is impressive, Kaylin. Really, I want you to feel like you belong here, he said quietly. That sentence hit differently. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the nerves he tried to mask. Was this his way of asking her in? Slowly, they ate, talked about Emery, laughed about her obsession with blueberries. But just as the conversation drifted into lightness, Kaylin's assistant knocked. Sir, you have a call with Director Liu in 5. He nodded, stood, then hesitated. Wait here? Nyla nodded. Of course. As he left, she walked to the window, 34 stories above the city. That's where he lived, above it all. And for the first time, she wondered if she could ever truly belong in this world, or if she'd always feel like a visitor with a visitor's badge. That night, back home, Nyla opened a drawer she rarely touched. Inside was a faded leather journal. She hadn't written in it since Emery's birth. But something about today, a meeting in Kaylin's polished world, the quiet questions it stirred, made her need her own words again. She opened to a blank page and wrote, Dear future me, if you ever feel small in someone else's world, remember, you helped create a new one with your love. You carried life, joy, light and sacrifice, and no one, not even the man you love, gets to make you feel like you need permission to belong. Tears blurred her handwriting, but she kept going. I know he cares. I know he's learning. But if one day he stops choosing this, choosing us, I need you to be okay. Not because you're used to it, but because you've seen your worth, and you won't forget it again. She closed the book and whispered into the quiet, I won't forget. It was a Sunday when Nyla's mother showed up unannounced. Pamela Harmon, retired English teacher and resident Southern firecracker, stood at Nyla's door holding a bag of books for Emery and a tray of chicken pot pie. Thought I'd surprise you all. Nyla smiled and stepped aside. You always do. They spent the afternoon playing with Emery, who gurgled and babbled as her grandmother read her nursery rhymes with theatrical flair. But when Emery finally went down for a nap, Pamela turned serious. Now, tell me about this Kaylin boy. Nyla hesitated. He's trying. Pamela sipped her tea. Trying doesn't raise children or keep a woman's heart safe. He's changed, Mom. He's not the same guarded man he used to be. But does he see you? Nyla blinked. What? Pamela set down her cup. Baby, does he see you, all of you? Not just the mother of his child, not just the loyal friend, but the woman who stayed. The woman who loved him in silence for years and still chose grace over resentment. Nyla looked down. I think he's learning, she whispered. Pamela reached out, cupping her daughter's face. Then make sure you're not shrinking while he does. The ceremony wasn't extravagant. It was intimate. Just close friends, a few family members, and Emery, who toddled around the rooftop garden in her white lace dress like she owned the place. The same rooftop where Kaylin once asked for a child was now adorned with hanging lanterns and ivy-wrapped railings. The scent of jasmine and lavender floated in the breeze. The skyline sparkled behind them, and the stars, like Nyla once wrote in her journal, were watching. Nyla stood in a simple but elegant cream gown, curls pinned back, eyes shimmering. And Kaylin? He'd never looked more human. He wasn't the tech mogul, the sharp-suited negotiator, or the emotionally distant recluse. He was just a man, holding her hand with trembling fingers, his vows scratched out on a napkin because he rewrote them 5 times that morning. "I used to think love had to be calculated," he began, voice thick. "That if it didn't make sense on paper, it couldn't work. Then you walked into my life 12 years ago and gave me every reason to feel instead of solve. You stood by me when I had nothing, and you didn't flinch when I had everything. You gave me Emery, and you gave me myself." Nyla blinked back tears. "You don't complete me," she whispered, "because I wasn't broken. But you made me believe I didn't have to carry love alone, and for that I'll walk with you, not behind, not ahead, but beside you. For as long as you'll have me." Emery clapped from Jaleesa's lap. They kissed under a sky of witness, and the applause came from souls who'd seen them survive, quietly, painfully, faithfully. They didn't fly to Paris or some villa off the Amalfi coast. They took a train to a quiet inn upstate, tucked between woods and wildflowers. No assistants, no digital planners, no media. Just Nyla, Kaylin, and a promise they were still learning how to keep. They went hiking, albeit with Kaylin dramatically clutching his knee halfway up the first incline. "I write code, not climb mountains." Nyla burst into laughter, snapping photos of him pretending to die on a mossy rock. They ate at roadside diners, made love without pressure, talked without screens, cried without shame. One night, wrapped in wool blankets under a starlit balcony, Nyla asked quietly, "Did you ever think we'd get here?" Kaylin shook his head. "I didn't think I'd survive being loved this completely. Does it scare you still?" "Every day. But I'm not running anymore." She leaned her head against his chest. "Good. Because I'm not chasing." Returning home wasn't glamorous. Emery had a fever the night they got back. Nyla's luggage was lost. Kaylin's inbox had exploded. The kitchen had ants. But even in the chaos, something had shifted. They weren't CO parents living parallel lives. They were partners. Kaylin started taking Emery to school 3 days a week, walking her through the gates with a superhero backpack and a kiss to her forehead. Nyla returned to teaching part-time, her voice confident in classrooms and policy meetings. Her eyes no longer dimmed themselves for anyone. On weekends, they hosted family brunches. Kaylin and Jaleesa formed a sarcastic sibling rivalry, with Jaleesa saying things like, "If you ever hurt her again, I'll hack your servers and rename every file fool." To which Kaylin deadpanned, "And I'll still call you for help resetting my microwave." Nyla would watch them banter with a smile. She had a husband who learned how to stay, a daughter who laughed in her sleep, a home that wasn't built from dreams, but from days survived and chosen. Emery had just turned 4. She was precocious, hilarious, and already obsessed with robotics. Kaylin beamed whenever she asked about his work, and he started designing child-friendly coding games just to watch her play. One night, after Emery fell asleep building a Lego bridge on the living room rug, Nyla and Kaylin curled up on the couch. Kaylin was unusually quiet. "What's on your mind?" she asked, brushing her thumb along his temple. He sighed. "I saw my father today." Nyla sat up. "What?" "He was at a private investor dinner. I didn't know he'd be there." She reached for his hand. "He looked old, smaller than I remembered, and he said he was proud of me." Nyla didn't speak. She let the silence hold him. "I thought it would mean something," Kaylin whispered, "but it didn't. It just made me wonder why I ever needed his pride to feel worthy." She pressed her lips to his knuckles. "You don't anymore," she said. You became a man who makes himself proud. His voice cracked. Because of you. She leaned into him, forehead against his. No. Because of you. I just loved you long enough for you to see it. The auditorium buzzed with folding chairs and cell phones. Emery, dressed as a tiny astronaut, took center stage and belted out her one line with the conviction of a Broadway star. Kalen cried. Nyla squeezed his knee. And afterward, when Emery ran into his arms and said, "Did I do good, Daddy?" he whispered. "You did more than good. You lit up the stars." Later that night, after putting Emery to bed, Nyla stood at the kitchen sink, washing lunch containers. Kalen came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist and whispered, "Remember when I asked you to have a baby but not a life?" She nodded slowly. "I was so wrong," he said, voice thick. "You gave me a life I never imagined. And I want to spend the rest of mine thanking you for it." She turned to face him, tears in her eyes. "You already do. Every single day." It wasn't wealth that defined their story. It wasn't power or press, or even the rooftop proposal. It was the quiet decision made each day to choose each other. When the world was loud, when the pain was sharp, when the fear returned, they chose. Emery grew. So did they. And long after the headlines faded, the mansion emptied, and the flowers from their wedding dried into keepsakes, there remained a love that started not with fireworks, but with a simple question. Will you help me create something beautiful? And an answer that changed everything. Only if we build it together. Rain swept across Manhattan in sheets, as if the sky itself couldn't decide whether to weep or scream. Kalen sat in the back of his town car, staring blankly out the tinted window as the wipers sliced across his view. The city lights bled into each other, neon dreams distorted by water. His jaw tightened as he turned his phone over in his palm. A missed call from Nyla. He hadn't returned it. Not yet. Not because he didn't want to, but because what he had to say might ruin everything. That morning, he'd met with the Orion board. Investors had questions, and one in particular, Victor Lamar, a ruthless hedge fund magnate, had cornered Kalen privately after the quarterly report. "People are whispering," Victor said smoothly, crossing one leg over the other in his office leather. "You're distracted. Fatherhood has softened you." Kalen's silence had been all the confirmation needed. Victor leaned in. "We bet on the man who built a billion-dollar tech ecosystem before he turned 35, not on a family man who forgets to return calls." The message had been clear. Being present for Emery and showing up for Nyla wasn't just a personal risk. It was a professional liability, and for the first time, Kalen felt torn. How could he prove he could be both, a visionary and a father? A CEO and a man in love? By the time he arrived at Nyla's brownstone, the rain had turned to mist. He stood outside the door, palms sweating, heart a drumline in his chest. When she opened it, barefoot in joggers and a satin bonnet, he couldn't speak. He just collapsed into her, emotionally, physically. Nyla caught him like gravity was her job. He stayed there, his forehead resting on her shoulder as she held him tight, until Emery's sleepy cries stirred from the baby monitor upstairs. Only then did Nyla gently pull back. "Come inside." Later, as Emery dozed in her crib, Nyla curled beside Kalen on the couch, her eyes searching his. "You're somewhere else tonight," she said softly. "Want to tell me where?" He rubbed his temples. "I think I'm being asked to choose between what? Between being everything I want to be for you and Emery, or staying the man I built my career to protect." Nyla's face didn't flinch. "You're not choosing between us and your career, Kalen. You're choosing between fear and growth." He swallowed hard. "They think I'm weaker now. Because I have something to lose." She leaned in, her voice firm. "Love doesn't make you weak. It makes you real." The next day, Kalen made a decision. He walked into the Orion boardroom with fire in his stride and conviction in his voice. "I've heard the concerns," he said, eyes sweeping across the table. "And I'm here to clarify something. Yes, I'm a father. Yes, I'm in love. And no, I won't apologize for either." Silence, then murmurs. Then Victor spoke, voice like ice. And if that compromises the confidence of our partners? Kaelan didn't blink. Then they're investing in a robot, not a man. It was a risk, a big one. But Kaelan left that meeting taller than he'd walked in. He returned to Nyla that night with Chinese takeout and a smile that finally reached his eyes. Weeks passed, and spring bloomed in the city. Emery took her first steps on Nyla's birthday, wobbling across the living room floor and crashing straight into her father's arms. They all laughed until they cried. Jaleesa made a cake shaped like a heart and toasted to mature love, the kind that isn't perfect but chooses each other anyway. Kaelan and Nyla grew closer, still without a ring or a timeline. They slept side by side, built routines around Emery's needs, and stole kisses in laundry rooms while folding onesies. But one evening, during a walk in the park, Kaelan paused at the fountain and said, "I want to ask you something." Nyla's heart skipped. "Not that," he added quickly, laughing. "Not yet." She raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" "I want us to live together. Full time. Us and Emery. I want a home, not 2 apartments and a schedule." Nyla hesitated. He noticed. "It's too soon?" "No," she said carefully. "It's not that. It's just, you've always been a man who compartmentalizes. Merging lives is messy. I want messy. I want lived in. I want you waking up next to me without needing a calendar reminder." That made her laugh. "You really know how to romance a woman." But in the end, she said yes. The new home was a brownstone in Harlem, sunny, creaky-floored and warm. Emery had a room painted in soft lavender. Nyla kept her old couch because love is allowed to be comfortable, not curated. They hosted Sunday dinners, danced in the kitchen, and argued over baby monitors and sleep training books. One night, Nyla woke up to find Kaelan staring at her, bare-chested and quiet in the moonlight. "What?" she murmured. "I keep thinking I'll mess this up." "You will," she said simply. "We both will. But we'll fix it together." He leaned in and kissed her, not with heat, but with reverence. Trouble didn't wait long. One evening, a journalist from Tech Tide emailed Nyla directly. A leaked Orion internal memo had named her as a public distraction in recent executive reviews. "They called me a distraction?" she asked Kaelan, holding up the email. His face darkened. "I'll handle it." But Nyla raised her palm. "No. I want to respond." She typed carefully, publicly, and posted her statement on LinkedIn. "I am not a distraction. I'm a mother, a professional, a woman who supports a man navigating love, fatherhood, and legacy. If your idea of leadership excludes humanity, then your vision is already obsolete." The post went viral, and for the first time in Orion's history, a partner's voice carried the same weight as the CEO's. Later that night, Kaelan took Nyla's hand in bed. "You were brilliant." She leaned into his shoulder. "I just told the truth. I've spent my whole life building things," he whispered. "But I think the best thing I'll ever build is with you." Months passed. One evening, Emery giggled from her high chair, while Kaelan and Nyla made dinner side by side. Music floated in from the Bluetooth speaker, an old soul classic Nyla's father used to play. And then Kaelan dropped the spoon. Turned, dropped to one knee. No velvet box, no speech, just trembling hands and a whisper. "Will you?" Nyla froze, then laughed through her tears. "You're supposed to ask a question. I'm asking everything." She bent down and kissed him. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, to everything." The wedding was small, just 20 friends and a backyard full of fairy lights. Emery wore a flower crown. Kaelan wore a trembling smile. And Nyla? Nyla wore joy. Not the kind bought or borrowed, but the kind that's earned after a decade of loving silently, giving gently, and finally being seen in full light. The sun shimmered through the gauzy curtains of Nyla's new apartment, a brownstone nestled just off Madison. A far cry from her old one-bedroom in the Bronx, this place had high ceilings, brick accent walls, and space to grow. But it wasn't the aesthetics that made it feel like home. It was the Saturday morning dance parties, the way Emery's giggles echoed off the walls, and how Kaylin now moved through her space like he belonged there. Because he did. This was the first time Nyla let herself have nice things. Not just material ones, but soft mornings in silk robes, forehead kisses over avocado toast, and a man who chose to show up. They still weren't married, but there was no longer any doubt they were a family. Still, the world outside their door hadn't forgotten. The interview request. "Babe, you should read this," Kaylin said, holding out his phone one evening after Emery's bedtime. Nyla took it, her brows pinching as she scanned the email. "Dear Mr. Reeve, we are preparing a Forbes cover feature on tech leaders balancing innovation and family. Given your rise as a father and public figure, we'd love to include a segment on you and your CO to parenting journey. If your daughter's mother is willing, we'd love to interview her as well. Warmly, Heather Song, senior writer, Forbes magazine." Nyla lowered the phone. "They want me to talk about us?" Kaylin nodded. "Only if you're comfortable." I didn't say yes. Yet, she thought about it. About how quiet she'd been for so long. About how many women might be out there, hiding their brilliance because love had always felt conditional or invisible. Maybe her voice mattered. "Do I get to tell my story my way?" she asked. "Completely," Kaylin promised. She held his gaze. "Then I'll do it." The interview day. Heather Song turned out to be young, stylish, and refreshingly unpretentious. She arrived with a photographer, a note of gratitude, and an immediate respect for boundaries. "Nothing off the record will be quoted," she said. They sat in the sunlit living room, Emery playing in a playpen just a few feet away. Heather began, gently. "Tell me what it meant when Kaylin asked you to carry his child, but not be his partner." Nyla paused, then smiled, not bitter, but honest. "It meant grief. It meant dignity. It meant... I knew I had a choice. I could say no. I didn't. And I don't regret it." Heather leaned in. "Why not?" Nyla looked over at Emery. "Because the love I gave, even unreturned at the time, wasn't wasted. It became a person. And that person's smile is worth every risk I took." Kaylin sat silently beside her, his hand wrapped around hers. "And I was blind. For years. But she gave me a second chance. That's the kind of grace you don't get twice." Heather's smile was genuine. "And now?" Kaylin looked at Nyla. "Now I wake up every day trying to deserve them both." The cover drop. 2 weeks later, it hit the stands, Silicon and Soul, the CEO who found family beyond code. The cover showed Kaylin seated with Emery in his lap and Nyla at his side, both their hands resting on her shoulders. Not posed, not polished, just real. Nyla read the article 3 times that night. Then her phone exploded. Old classmates, co-workers, even her estranged uncle from Houston. "You did it with dignity, girl," Jaleesa texted. That part made Nyla cry. She didn't feel famous. She felt seen, pressure and pause. Of course, the attention came with complications. Bloggers speculated a wedding was near. Brand offers poured in, diaper companies, mom tech startups, parenting podcasts. Kaylin was suddenly a poster boy for modern fatherhood, and Nyla the woman who softened him. One day over lunch, Nyla pushed her salad aside and said, "Do you ever worry we're becoming an image instead of a reality?" Kaylin looked up. "Every day. That's why I don't care about any of it. Just you and Emery." "But I do care," Nyla said. "Not about fame, but about being real. I want to make sure we are still us when no one's looking." That night, they unplugged, left their phones in a drawer, lit candles, put on slow jazz, and danced in the kitchen barefoot, just like before the world found them. The bump in the road. Not all chapters are soft. One night, they had their first real fight. It started when Nyla said she was thinking of going back to work part-time. Kaylin's expression changed. "Already?" "It's been over a year," she replied. "I miss my students. I miss teaching. But Emery still needs you full-time. We can afford a nanny." His silence was thick. "I'm not trying to run away from motherhood," Nyla said, "but I didn't give up my identity to become your storybook." Kaylin stood, hands on hips. I never asked you to. No, she said. But you assumed I'd always be available, always here. And now that I want one thing for myself, you're looking at me like I betrayed you. He exhaled sharply. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I've gotten used to leaning on you. Too much. She reached across the counter. We're still learning. But I need to know you trust me to balance motherhood and purpose. I do, he said. Starting now, reconnection. As a gesture of trust, Kaylin hired a nanny who was both certified in early childhood education and warm enough to feel like family. And Nyla, one crisp September morning, walked back into a classroom. Her students were older now, middle schoolers with wild questions and broken hearts. But she felt alive in front of a whiteboard again. That afternoon, she came home to find Kaylin in the backyard, blowing bubbles with Emery, both of them giggling like fools. She leaned on the doorframe, her heart stretching wide. This wasn't a perfect life, but it was hers. A surprise of their own. On a rainy Tuesday, Nyla called Kaylin from the doctor's office. I need you to come. He arrived in 20 minutes, breathless. The OB smiled at them gently. Congratulations again. You're 6 weeks along. Kaylin blinked. I'm sorry, what? Nyla held up the ultrasound photo. It wasn't planned, she said. But it's real. He sat down slowly, then laughed. Hard, full, startled joy. I never thought I'd feel this ready, he whispered. Nyla looked at him sideways. You're not going to panic and write another PR statement, are you? He grinned. Only if it includes the words, I'm the luckiest man alive. End scene, firelight and forever. That night, after Emery went to sleep and the rain danced against the windows, Kaylin built a fire in the hearth. They sat together on the couch, legs tangled, hearts finally in sync. I don't need a wedding, Nyla whispered. Just this. He shook his head. No, I need one. Not for the world. For me. I want to say vows, I mean this time. I want a promise sealed with more than DNA. She touched his cheek. Then, let's make it ours. Small, honest. Home. And in the glow of the firelight, they planned a ceremony not made for Pinterest, but for healing. For them. For family. For the kind of love that grew from pain, flourished in truth, and bloomed completely in its own time. The skyline twinkled like scattered diamonds tossed across the velvet of night. On the same rooftop where he first asked her to carry his child, Kaylin Reeves stood nervously adjusting the cuff of his tailored jacket. The rooftop lounge was transformed. No journalists, no board members. Just fairy lights wrapped around pillars and candles flickering inside glass lanterns. It wasn't opulence, it was intention. Every detail was curated with Nyla in mind, from the vintage jazz playlist humming softly through the speakers to the smell of freshly cut jasmine, her mother's favorite flower. Kaylin stood by the railing, heart thudding, palms clammy despite the autumn chill. He'd built empires, negotiated billion-dollar mergers, delivered keynotes at global summits. But none of that prepared him for this. He was about to ask a woman to be his forever, not out of necessity, not for convenience, but because he finally understood what home truly meant. And it was her. Nyla had no idea. Jaleesa had lured her out for a fake birthday dinner with a few girlfriends, while Kaylin played full-time dad for the evening. Emery had grown into a spirited toddler with curls like spring coils and a giggle that could melt the coldest heart. She clung to Kaylin's neck as he tried to fit her into her dress shoes. No, she protested, kicking. Yes, he laughed. Tonight's special. You got to look like the little queen you are. He finally bribed her with one of Nyla's sugar-free cookies and slid her feet into the silver butterfly shoes. She's ready, he called as the hired sitter arrived to take over for a few hours. Then he checked the velvet box again. Inside sat a ring that wasn't flashy but held meaning, an oval-cut sapphire set in a rose gold band. Sapphire for honesty, rose gold for warmth. By 7, everything was set. Jaleesa texted Nyla, "Just meet me upstairs. I forgot something on the rooftop." Still in heels and a curve-hugging navy dress, Nyla stepped out of the elevator, expecting maybe candles and cake. Instead, she walked into memory. The rooftop, the skyline, the same lounge chairs. But this time, no proposal of parenting, only possibility. Soft music played. A trail of white rose petals guided her forward. And there he was, Kaelan, dressed in midnight blue, holding Emery, who waved proudly like royalty. Nyla froze. "I know," he said softly, walking toward her. "I didn't plan this the traditional way. We made a baby before a vow. You gave me a family before I gave you a ring. But I've been catching up every day since—" Nyla's breath caught in her chest. "I wasn't ready when I first asked you to do the impossible. But you said yes anyway. You gave me more than a child. You gave me a mirror. You gave me laughter. And you gave me time to grow into the man I want to be, the man I hope can be yours." He knelt, Emery still in one arm, and opened the velvet box with the other. "Nyla Harmon, will you marry me and let me keep building this life with you, on purpose, this time?" Tears spilled over her lashes before her voice could form. Emery clapped. "Mama, say yes." Nyla laughed through her tears. Yes. 1,000 yeses. They didn't rush a wedding. Instead, they focused on integration, blending two lives that had always hovered side by side into one. They bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, where the kitchen always smelled of something baking and the living room floor stayed littered with blocks and books. They shared routines, morning coffee with forehead kisses, bath time debates over Emery's hair products, bedtime stories told in whispers and giggles. Kaelan enrolled in therapy, serious therapy, not just for her, but for himself. He'd spent too long compartmentalizing love and ambition, believing he could only have one. But watching Nyla balance motherhood, freelance writing and joy, all without losing herself, taught him that wholeness was possible. Their intimacy grew deeper. They made love like it meant something, because it did. It was no longer about filling silence or scratching desire. It was about seeing each other, all of each other, with the lights on, with the past unhidden. One afternoon, Kaelan found Nyla asleep on the couch. Emery curled at her feet, and a novel open on her chest. He didn't wake them. He just stood there, smiling. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who tried to engineer life like software. No variables, no bugs, no emotions. And he thought about the woman who taught him that love wasn't a code to crack, it was a rhythm to feel. He bent and kissed her forehead. She stirred. "You okay?" "I am now." They chose the rooftop again. Just them, Jaleesa officiating with tears, Emery dropping petals down the aisle, and a dozen close friends. Kaelan's vows were simple. "I promise to keep showing up, even when I don't have the words. I promise to protect your peace, match your passion, and never stop learning you." Nyla's were softer, but stronger. "I don't need perfection. I just need presence. And you've given me that more than anyone ever has. You made me believe I wasn't asking too much. I was just asking the wrong man. But now, you are the right one." They kissed to the sound of laughter, applause, and Emery squealing, "My mama and dada married." On their 5-year anniversary, Nyla found a note tucked inside her journal. It read, "You once said you wrote me a letter you never expected me to read. So now, here's mine. One you don't have to hide. You saved me, Nyla. From numbness, from fear, from myself. Our daughter has your heart. Our home has your warmth. And I finally have what I never thought I deserved. Someone who sees me, all of me, and stays. If I ever forget how we got here, remind me of mango chips, butterfly shoes, and quiet rooftop promises. I love you, then and always. See." Nyla wiped a tear from the corner of her eye and whispered to the wind outside their window. "I love you too." If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. What does real love look like? Not the fairy tales, not the chase, but the steady, intentional love that shows up, even after fear, even after silence, even after 12 long years of almost. Nyla gave her heart not to be chosen someday, but to remind herself she was worthy all along. Kaelan didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to be present. And Emery? She became the proof that love can rewrite legacy, one gentle moment at a time. Have you ever loved someone in silence, hoping they'd one day see you? Or maybe you were the one who finally woke up before it was too late. Drop your story in the comments. Your experience might give someone else the courage to choose love that chooses them back. Like if this journey moved you. Comment if it felt familiar. Subscribe so you don't miss the next beautiful story waiting just for you. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories. We remind people that healing is possible, and that real love doesn't come perfect. It comes honest. This was Mr. Charles' Stories. Until next time, stay soft, stay strong, stay loved.